Welcome back, one and all, to the Information Revolution, which, if you don't know, is a podcast about information from three people working with information in our day jobs. So, my name is Michael Upton. I'm an information management consultant based in Wellington, New Zealand.
My name's Judi Vernau. I'm an information architect and I also work in Wellington, New Zealand.
And I'm Karl Melrose. I'm an information management consultant based in Adelaide in Australia. Michael, Microsoft 365.
Yeah, that's right. Specifically today, following on from a theme to do with how we model information, how we classify and group it, wanted to talk about those kinds of features in Microsoft 365, which really comes down to some of the things you can do in Microsoft Purview, which is really just a console that groups together a bunch of different technologies. It's really its own technology, but also want to talk about SharePoint Premium. And SharePoint Premium was, when was it rebranded? End of last year? Was called Syntex. So if you ever heard someone talk about Syntex, Microsoft Syntex or Project Syntex, Microsoft rebranded that as SharePoint Premium because primarily the features that it delivers actually just affect SharePoint. You do have to pay extra for it, and I guess from a branding perspective, they thought all these customers out there have got SharePoint, and if we call it SharePoint Premium, then people might look at it rather than if it's called, may as well be called Binklebonk or something, then people have no great incentive to look at it. So
it's safe to say, Michael, that Microsoft didn't tap your branding and brand naming expertise for this change.
I'd have bought Binklebonk, definitely, yeah.
Spike Milligan came out of my subconscious there. That's Bad Jelly, the witch. But anyway.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big literary reference for this early on.
So we're here today to talk about Binklebonk the Tree Goblin. I should say we've had plenty of new subscribers in the last cycle since we published an episode, so I'd like to apologise for this introduction. And so may as well get into it. So the first thing that I did want to talk about is what I would describe as auto classification, and in this context, what I mean by that is rules and processes that try and detect and group information for management purposes. So I don't necessarily mean a narrower version of classification that might be for security perspective, like in New Zealand, we talk about information classification. We typically mean applying protective markings to documents so that, this one's classified in this way. But I'm talking way more broadly. I'm just meaning there are features that allow us to basically group information and then trigger rules off that. So I decided it's probably easiest to talk about what you can actually do. So as in what are the results of that classification process, and then actually talk about sort of kind of the basis on which you can classify some things. So inside Microsoft Purview, so you need sort of one of the more expensive licenses for 365 in order to do this. You have dashboards where you can browse content based on the way it's being classified. So basically, with the right permissions, you can click through and you might identify a certain set of content, and you might say, okay, this is, let's say, personally identifiable information that could cause harm to individuals if it was released. And you click on that, and then it will show you where that shows up, and it will show you that across multiple places where information could land. So it might say SharePoint at the top level, might say Exchange for the email, might say OneDrive, and you can start digging down, and it will show you, okay, it's inside this site, or it's inside this user's OneDrive, or it's inside this mailbox, and it'll show you numbers of hits. So
Michael, can I ask you, is it showing you a particular document or information object at that point, or is it showing you a container that has that information object in it?
So it presents the containers as a hierarchy that you can then browse through down to the item. And the classification applies to the item. So, it applies to the single document or to the email or whatever. And so, practically you might have a thing that says SharePoint. There's 7,000 things. you click into SharePoint and it shows you sites. From memory, it's just based on the URL, so the address. And you go, oh yeah, this one that's called, finance. I'll click into finance because that's got 3,000 and that seems a lot. And you go down and down and down. And if you have the right permissions, you actually get to the point where you actually can preview the individual documents right there in a dashboard or, in a viewer. And you can look at them from there. Anywhere along this path, you can export, so you can pull stuff out as a spreadsheet and, I don't know, do something terrible with the spreadsheet. It's unsurprisingly, I should also say this is completely bypassing front-end permissions. So, oh yeah, it's OneDrive. Oh yeah, it's the CE's OneDrive. Oh yep, it's the folder that says, people who I wish were dead, whatever it is. I mean, hopefully not that, but it literally bypasses all the front-end permission model. So it's even in the construct of Microsoft Purview, which has all kinds of sort of role-based permissions and things. These are very specific permissions that you would apply that would allow you to actually get to the point of viewing what's there. Yeah. So you can get that view of the world and the kinds of classifying methods, all of them get presented together. So you can kind of dig in on any kind of form of classification that you've applied. And then the other main thing that's in there is you've also got the Activity Explorer, which is showing you shifts in that, and it's showing you how people are labeling things or how things are being classified in the system. And so that's a time-based view rather than an object-based view, but they obviously interlink. So it's very in the back end. The other things that happen here are that you can use the way things are being classified, depending on the method we get to. You can then use that to trigger data loss prevention or other information protection rules. And the information protection options in Purview are pretty broad. So they run from basically alert me. So, for instance, when something that's classified a certain way lands in a certain place, tell me about it. And that could be an email to an end user, it could be an email to a group, it could be just an alert stacks up in a dashboard of alerts that people can go and view, right through to strip the permissions from this object and encrypt it in place. So one of the complexities that I'm not seeing people get to yet is that basically you can add another layer to your permission model inside 365. So say I've got a location in SharePoint, I could apply policies that also say when it meets certain criteria in the back end, change the permissions on this document. So I save something and it's classified a certain way by the system. Basically, it looks really high risk, then change the permissions on it.
And when you say change permissions, Michael, what sort of things?
So literally change who can view or open or edit that document. And so basically break the inheritance on the site level or, whatever container and just apply it based on the classification as well. So it kind of becomes a sort of a matrix. You've got inheritance from where did I put the thing, plus how did the system classify it according to a risk profile that we've built and defined. And so the interesting thing about that, I'll give you an example of that I understand that Microsoft uses is that you might have your kind of circles of trust that are only employees or even only a subset of employees. Then it might be employees, then it might be employees and what they would call contingent workers, basically dirty contractors like me. And then, and then further out. And then further out to sort of partners. So, vendors, suppliers, other people who have been invited into the tenancy, but are not in that thing. And so you might say, oh, well, this information, for instance, looks like it's commercially sensitive. Let's strip the permission group that gives those external contractors access, something like that. What I'd say straight away is that the way I see these classifications being used in New Zealand government is always about the kind of information classification system. And I think That's a real missed opportunity because I think those classifications are way too broad to actually drive system behavior reliably, as in, so one of our classifications would be that something is in confidence. Like, in confidence covers this vast range of stuff, and yeah, I think it's kind of like official in Australia from what I know, and it's sort of like, well, so what? Like, we're not going to trigger a rule off that. We're not going to set off alerts. We're not going to, what are we going to do if something is being classified as in confidence? And so at that point, it kind of raises questions for me about, well, we've used the word catalytic before. How would applying this classification, or how would setting up rules that classify things a certain way, trigger a change? Like, what is the change that it catalyzes? And what you can do. I wasn't necessarily intending to go there because this isn't about auto classification necessarily, but with sensitivity labels, which is this technology, um, you can have it auto apply headers in documents, for instance, that say, oh, this one's in confidence or not. But that text can be completely separate from what the sensitivity labels actually, what the rules are and what the label is actually called. So you could have a label, and the label could just be something like
highly protected. I think they're the defaults, aren't they? The sensitivity labels.
Maybe, yeah, I can't remember. But I mean, you could definitely have a label that is more just focused on a reason, a rationale that normal people would get. So you could have a label that says something like, well, I used the phrase commercially sensitive before, something like that. Says says things that competitors would get an
Mm.
unfair advantage if they saw.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
Yeah.
this email has commercially sensitive information in it. Be careful who you send it to. That kind of behavioural changing
Yeah,
type
yeah,
thing.
exactly. And when you select that, that could then, we could build the logic very, very, very simply that says, mark this as in confidence if that's the right security classification, if that's the right marking we're supposed to put on the document. So my
Oh, I
point is,
see.
we could build a set of sensitivity labels that more aligned to both sort of business, well, not both, just to business needs, including one of the business needs being that they're easily understood by our people. So, yeah, and still comply with information classification kind of schemes that we're supposed to be working under. So, yeah, it's sorry, I think that's a bit of a tangent, but hopefully a useful one for people who are thinking about this stuff, because to me it does seem like a real missed opportunity, or one of those things that I hope in the New Zealand government we've basically kind of gone this way as a sort of an initial stepping stone, and that over time people will start refining how we do this. Yeah.
So you said, Michael, it presents containers as a hierarchy so that you can
Mm.
browse down to an item. What's the hierarchy based on?
So the hierarchy, primarily if we talk about SharePoint, so basically it's the
Yep.
workload is what Microsoft would call it. So basically kind of which technology or app. So SharePoint would be top level folder. Exchange would be another top level folder. OneDrive is another top level folder. I can't remember if Teams chats in scope. I don't think it is. Um, and then if I click into SharePoint, what I will see is a site. And so when I describe it as a hierarchy, it's that flat. So it's going to go from SharePoint to a flat list of sites. And if
Right.
you've got 1,000 sites or you've got 5,000 sites, then it's going to be a list of 5,000, sorted by number of results from memory. And then when you click into a site, it's going to take you to a document library. And if you click into a
Right.
document
Right.
library, I
Right.
can't remember if it goes to
Right.
folder level inside the
Okay.
library, but yeah,
But it's using a structure that's already set up, is what you're saying.
yes.
Yeah.
And if you are familiar with how the URLs are normally split, it's basically the sub splits in the URL in the site
Right.
address. Yeah.
Right.
So you cannot do anything fancy there in terms of representations of that information in different ways. Yeah, it's purely based on well, I'm making a wild assumption, but storage. But yeah.
No, I mean the thing. So I mean the next sort of thing down that that I'm trying to think about, and this has been where I've been stuck with Microsoft 365 in general. I think I see lots of features that let you say, let's identify this characteristic of a document or thing of some description. But then it's the next step, and this is what I'm really interested in hearing more about, is the action steps that you can take after that. But then it's also, how do some of these action steps mesh in with, our concepts about what records are and how they should be treated and all of those kinds of things. Because the environments that we work in, obviously, those concepts are of significant importance. And every time I look at how Microsoft 365 treats those things, I just get stuck. I end up in a place where, I've got this thing and I can apply it to individual objects, but there's no way to sort of aggregate, things into records as we would understand them. Or, I can apply things to aggregations, but then I can't do anything with the aggregation or, whatever it happens to be. And that's sort of the next level down, because there's great tools in there for exactly as you say, it's got this characteristic. Let's mark it in some way.
Mm-mm.
But then it's getting from the marking to the ability to take action in the kind of environments that we work in that I'm really interested in, that I'm a bit stuck on myself. So, which is one of the reasons why I'm really pleased that we're doing this morning.
Yeah, it is tricky because, as you say, even where you can sort of, basically just group stuff, logically group things together so that, they form what we describe as an aggregation. The actions that are triggered against those, actions are always triggered against items. They're always triggered against individual
Right.
objects inside 365. That's just kind of how it works. But for instance, you could set a default sensitivity label on a document library so that every document going in it gets the same label, and then the same rule applies to all of them. But when the rule is triggered, it's still triggered against each
individually.
document. Yeah. So I think before we kind of get into that universe, I wanted to talk about how you can do the auto side. So how do you,
Yeah.
what are the sort of bases on which you can trigger the classification? So there's really three main ways out of the box in Purview. And this is putting aside the kinds of things I just described, where you can just set defaults on containers so that certain things get labeled certain ways. So three things you can do. One's called a trainable classifier, and a trainable classifier is your classic machine learning approach where you say, okay, these 50 documents, these all represent commercially sensitive, if we keep using that example, and I'm going to tell the machine these are commercially sensitive, find me more things that are also commercially sensitive. And then it will run off and go, what about these ones? And you can go, yes, no. And that runs over a period of time and tries to sort of build accuracy over time with more examples. Microsoft's initial indications on that are that you do need at least 50 positives, and you should make sure you definitely have negatives aside so that you can make sure you're not falsely classifying the same thing. I haven't come across anyone yet who's had a good time with that. Sorry, I should say there's also out of the box trainable classifiers. So Microsoft has gone and trained a bunch of stuff, and it tells you, you can use these, and these run straight away in your Microsoft 365 tenancy if you've got the right license. So what I described before, where you can go and browse stuff, you can, you could go and do that with the right permissions. You could go and browse things that have been classified according to the out-of-the-box trainable classifiers straight away. They seem really diverse and strange to me. Like some of them seem to be sort of about topics of work, like this relates to finance. Some of them's kind of about, I can't remember, there's some very American phrase that basically means it's a bit sweary. It's got rude words in it. It's really
Vanity.
dope. Yeah, probably profanity or something. There's definitely one that's called targeted harassment. So it's trying to
Oh,
identify where it looks like, you've got internal issues with harassment. Um,
yes.
and yeah, so those exist, and people, could explore those. I think one of the nice things is that because you've got these kinds of essentially dashboards, the Content Explorer, the Activity Explorer, where you can go and browse around. If these things are running in the background and they're not accurate, at the least you've got this sort of mechanism for exploring that and checking that and going, oh yeah, okay, this isn't going to work for us. This isn't there's sort of no harm. No, it's definitely not going to impact anything for end users unless you start going and building rules off it, which obviously you wouldn't immediately. So trainable classifiers is the first one. The second of the three is sensitive information types. Again, sensitive information types, there's a whole set of them that have been built by Microsoft. And those are condition based. So they're basically rules and logic that says if you identify these kinds of content in there, so it's looking for sort of content matching, and I guess there's some smarts in there about how it does that. For instance, this one looks like it's got 5 credit card numbers and 10 people's names, and but then there's some broader things like kind of health conditions, things like that, which I don't know. I've never scratched the surface of what that means or what it identifies.
No, but some of it's looking for, it's going from that personal information to the sensitive personal information classes that we've got under, the Privacy Act here in Australia and those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's it. And they actually have profiles that provide you buckets of those combined rules to match, at least for Australia. They've got Australian ones for like privacy, and uh, but I will say for New Zealand listeners, it also has, some of our New Zealand specific things like IRD numbers, the equivalent of a
Tax file number.
TFN,
Yep.
yep, in Australia. Um, and you can sort of group and combine those, and you can build thresholds as well. So if it's like, look, we don't really care if someone mentions one IRD number or, one driver's license number or something, but we do care if someone has a spreadsheet with 500 of these things in it. Someone's done an export from their system and they've just dumped it on I don't know, dumped it into an open SharePoint site, for instance, or is sending it as an attachment to an email might be more relevant in terms of some data breaches I've seen. Um, so that can then trigger any of the kind of protections that we could get onto. So in the sensitive information types, that's also where you can bring through document properties. And so that's where you can kind of bring everything together in terms of sort of bringing things that you've chosen in terms of your architectural decisions into how things start getting classified in the back end. And then the third one, which I have not seen in use, but I can imagine contexts where it would be helpful, is an exact data match. And an exact data match, as you might expect, is you're basically pulling through a set of data from another system and saying, classify stuff according to an exact data match. Find those values. And so a classic example of that might be pulling through employee numbers
Customer
or
numbers, staff
yeah,
numbers.
absolutely. So any
Yep.
kind of IDs you're using in other systems that you wanted to bring through and say, look, the presence of this. Again, I picture a thing where someone's kind of spat out a report and then forgotten about it and left it somewhere. You know, classify this for us. Like identify those things that look like a spreadsheet with 5,000 of these IDs in them. Yeah.
I mean, it includes your standard regex stuff and those sorts of things as well, doesn't it? So you can
It
define,
does.
I mean, obviously you can define credit card numbers, but that would have been in sensitive information types. But if you want to sit down and say, we want to look for this type of
Yeah.
thing, you can
Yeah.
actually specify that quite exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
When I was just going to
Okay.
your second one, the trainable classifier one, which I'm really interested in, I'd love to see that in action. I know that when I was looking through thousands and thousands of documents working on auto categorization at various government departments, it always amazed me how different documents were. So one department mean, some departments were good at standardizing the way they presented information, but some just were not. And you'd get, and also looking back over time, you'd get all kinds of random stuff. And so actually quite hard to think of standard ways that you could set up
Yeah.
To make that kind of machine learning work very well. And the other thing I wanted to say was, how much opportunity do you get to feed the organization's own language into that training?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have to say that this is one that I haven't looked at too much yet, but it's mostly been because, yeah, I'm pretty skeptical about how you could deliver quality results for things that are not really, really similar. So, like invoicing is an example that we always use as kind of one that seems like, the actual structure and everything about it
Mm,
should be really consistent. And so you can imagine that working well. And I know we can, yeah, there'll be limits to what I'm saying, but um, as far as I know, you cannot sort of feed it with schemas or anything like that. So, any kind of a model of
It's
any flavor.
here is a document, and the document is this, category of
yeah.
thing. Classify
Yeah.
things that look like it as that category of thing.
Yeah. So
And
you
I mean,
can
this
see
is
that
something that
invoices that would work. You can see that things like briefing to the incoming minister, they're always the same kind of thing. They're going to work.
Yeah.
But then
Yep.
you just get all this random stuff.
all the dross of the universe. And and,
Yeah.
and this is a problem for me right now. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that I'm thinking about this, and it's not using the Microsoft 365 ML classifier. It's another vendor's thing, but
Mm.
same kind of thinking. It's really about
No
how we
doubt.
specify the training set. So it's what is the category that we are looking for? What is the absolute best representative of that category? So we're not so much
Mm.
looking for, we're dealing with retention classes, and the retention classes might be, what's one that doesn't give anything away. Let's say you've got some form of investigation or something like that. Well, what is the absolute best representative of that category that is always going to be there and is going to be the most representative of that category? And how do we make sure we get a training set that is full of those things, rather than,
Mm.
we know that there's going to be 400 emails for, an investigation training, an investigation class, because, people running investigations email people.
Mm-hmm.
We also know that there's going to be notes and documents and all kinds of things. But you know what? Out of every investigation, there's probably going to be an investigation report,
Yeah,
at
for
the end of
sure.
it.
Yep.
Same thing if you've got an audit class or some kind of contract class or some kind of, something else. Yes, you want the full gamut of content there, but when you're developing a training set, I'm really relying on the aggregation as a concept to say we need to classify this thing based on that document
Right.
specifically, and then we need to apply the class to everything that is around that. And if we pick the thing that is the most representative of that class, then we're going to get the highest quality of matches, and then we're going to be able to act on that.
Yeah, for sure. So
So
just confirming, I get what you mean. So in this case of an investigation, you want to say, well, where there's something that we're really confident is the investigation report, then the things around it become
Yeah, become
the
become the
aggregation
same
or the
class.
members
Yeah,
of.
become the
Yeah, yeah,
aggregation of
yeah.
that thing.
Yep, makes sense to me. I should just before we go too far away from the point that you raised, Judi, I should say that I was being specific that trainable classifiers, you can't do stuff in terms of the language of the organization. However, in that sensitive information types category, the one where you've got things like credit card numbers and regular expressions and things, there's this whole thing that I've never explored, I'll be honest, called keyword dictionary, where at least you can load in, I think it's literally a list of keywords because it's not the algorithms aren't doing any smarts in terms of sort of trying to understand, if you like, what those words are. It's just looking for instances. So matches, find me these words. So you can at least put in a keyword dictionary and you can create and maintain that, which basically could use the language of the organization. So, yeah.
Okay. And
can you
with
add
the
vectors and those sorts of things? So, I've got this regex pattern, and then, I want, if there's this keyword within a certain distance of it or something like that. I haven't explored that functionality enough. I think.
I don't know. You've got regular expressions and you've got keywords,
Yeah.
and you've got ways to combine them. I just haven't looked at how smart it is. Yeah. I
what
reckon
kind of testing regimes have you seen?
what I've seen typically is because you've got that thing that I described, the Content Explorer, where you can just sort of browse how well it's working. I've seen people configure rules and then just look at that. So you basically start from the perspective of, okay, we're going to try and classify things. So we're going to create, for instance, a new custom sensitive information type. We're going to see what that looks like. You go to the Content Explorer over days and go, well, what's showing up under that new thing for, investigations or whatever. And then really, as far as the testing goes, is just kind of looking at that and then seeing if you have the confidence to then continue from, okay, it's just identifying stuff, to we think this is going to justify building a rule in the data loss prevention side that's actually going to change something that people, will impact the system. Yeah. But it's, I haven't really seen much more than that. And I have seen pretty mixed results so far, which may just be that it's hard. It may just be that actually it requires significant effort, and requires significant experimentation, and that comes right over time. I've
But if
heard
you
horror
know,
stories of people going straight to, we're going to basically auto apply labels to things that will then trigger rules, and suddenly they've basically scuppered their business for the day while they're trying to fix everything.
we're going to make everything a regulatory record because
Mm.
that seems like a good idea.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah. Um, I do reckon, just in terms of keeping on going with all of these possibilities, is so one of the things that sort of one of the other aspects that you kind of interrelates here is those concepts of the sensitivity labels. You can build auto application policies for those. So you can basically say, go and find things and apply sensitivity labels, and the sensitivity labels absolutely show up in the front end, and they actually ordinarily will change what you can do with something if it gets a label applied to it. And so you can also do, these kind of auto apply things, and you can use different conditions there in the front end. Sorry, when I mean in the front end, I just mean visible to
user
people.
facing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas what I've been talking about up till now needn't actually be in people's faces whatsoever. Like, if something has a certain sensitivity, God, Microsoft and all these very similar words. If something
Yes.
had a
They've
sensitive
always been like that.
information, oh, totally. So if something has a sensitive information type, a person, just a normal user can't see that. They don't know. And it doesn't affect their day as far as they know.
But
But
very useful for profiling your content and
yeah,
starting to really understand what you've got. And I
for
mean, that,
sure.
I think, as you say, a lot of work involved in that, I think, in terms of
Mm.
defining your content types and really understanding what's important to you. And then, you go and look at, if you're doing it along the lines of retention schedules and those kinds of things, I mean, depending on where you are, somewhere between 200 and 2,000 classes that you,
Yeah,
stuff that you want to think about. But
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
that situational awareness, that is something I've been thinking about a lot. How can we gain it in Microsoft
Yeah,
365? And everything you're talking about, I mean, that seems like the tool for
yeah.
doing.
I mean, to my mind, you at least want to scratch the surface of it, right? You at least want to have a go with it, and then go, actually, it's not the right thing for us.
Or it
You
gets us
don't.
to here, and then we can use it. Then we can justify, some other tool or some greater investment or some, bringing in of smart people who know how this stuff works, Michael, to really focus and take us, start taking action based on these things.
It gets advertised as one of the things as a data catalogue, but from what you've said, that doesn't strike me as what I would imagine a data catalogue would be. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that
I don't know.
you
More a
could then
heuristic
look
than
at your assets in different ways, but that's not quite the same as being absolutely sure what you've got, which is what I would hope you would do in a data catalogue.
I mean, the other
more a
thing about
heuristic catalogue.
I mean, the Content Explorer concept, I mean, you come back to a kind of what do you do next with that, I think, is something, So it gives you the situational awareness. But I think a lot of the decisions and kind of actions that information folks might take would actually not really be in the system so much. Or for instance, you might go, all right, I'm going to go and look at this site and go and work with the people who use it to understand what they're doing, because this seems to be where there's a problem or, potential
Oh,
risk.
right. Okay.
Rather than I think a sort of data-y world of kind of people go, oh, right, we're going to build some fancy rules off the back of this that are going to trigger system behavior automatically. It might actually just be that you just want that first thing to give you more awareness to go and do all the kinds of things we've always said you want to do after you do some good discovery. It goes all the way back to our first episode.
We've got all these highly protected, and whatever your label is, things showing up over there, and they really shouldn't be. Or we have this system that's rated for, in Australia, protected level content, and all of a sudden, we have the next couple of levels up starting to show up there, and we can't do that. So we need to go. We need to take action based on that.
Yeah, and I guess what it emphasises, if you think that's the probable outcome, you think the probable outcome is you're going to go and take an action, like go and talk to the people who are creating and working on that information, then that sort of might open up possibilities for how you think about what you're even trying to do in terms of that initial classification, because instead of focusing on sensitivity, you might just say, look, it'd be really valuable for us to understand all the things that are about a particular topic. And if you can have a keywords dictionary and you can associate that with a sensitive information type, you could build an information type that's actually not really about risk, but could be about value. It could be about find me all the things that match these criteria that basically tell me this is the really, really good stuff that we really need to look after.
Yeah,
but it's a different framing to how Microsoft presents its product set.
Or similar. I mean, the one that just hit for me is we've just bought, back on the theme of investigations, or whatever your thing is, but we just bought a system to manage all of our investigative data, and now, as in some kind of case management system specifically for this purpose. And so now, because habits are hard to break, it's one of the things we know about information management generally. One of my core views on it is it's all built on habits. People turn up and have habits around how they do their work. So, you've got investigators that are used to structuring their work in certain ways, which, in my experience, has actually generally been with paper, but beyond that, we've just bought an investigation management system. We want to make sure all of our investigative data ends up in that system. So we are going to flag anything now that looks like investigative data that keeps showing up in these systems, any new things, so that we can create that habit change. I mean, that strikes me as actually something quite useful you could do, because
Sounds
that's one
like
of the
you need an
things
ontology.
Hey.
Oh, I thought we had one. I thought that's what we were talking about. But that seems like that habit change. That's one of the hardest things. Is when do you find out that you've got bad habits going on? Well, you find out in 10 years' time when you need to migrate from one storage or record system to another, and all of a sudden you find this mass of content. But unfortunately, then people have built 10 years of habits putting things in that place where you don't want them to, and it's really too late to do anything about it. So it's how do you create those signals so that you can come back to something and say, we need to keep pressing on these habits here. And I don't know about you, but it's that thing where I always find that if you've got an organisation with frontline managers who believe in the importance of specific ways of handling their information, those specific ways generally get done. But in a lot of cases, I think what the frontline managers are missing is they're missing some way of understanding what's being done by the 10 staff in their span of control, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
this
I mean,
could be a signal for that.
Culture's the most underrated aspect of what we need to work with and on, I reckon.
Yeah.
But I do feel that I should come back to what I said at the start, that we would also talk about SharePoint Premium, aka Binklebonk. So
Syntex.
And to try and get a bit of a segue in there. I mean, this is one of the things where it definitely crosses over into things that present something user facing as well. And so the SharePoint Premium content services will basically change what people can see and interact with, and you could do something with that. So I guess one of the things that I haven't really touched on is there's a concept with metadata in SharePoint where you can define it as what's called a managed property, and then you can use managed properties as logic and rules. You can use managed properties in search, for instance. You can build search interfaces and say, let this managed property show up. And so basically, if we put the jargon aside, I can take custom metadata and I can use custom metadata to drive system behavior, which is something that it's pretty opaque. You don't really see that somewhere in the interface, even in admin consoles. Oh, great, I'll just make a managed property and then this will, allow me to, I don't know, offer up a search facet, for instance. But one of the things that the premium thing does is basically auto tagging of metadata. And so you can say, I've built myself a lovely little taxonomy, a little hierarchy of terms, and hey, content services, use this and look for things that are in this hierarchy and find them in the system, and then auto-populate the metadata fields, on a particular document. So basically look for where things match this here. You can include anything that's in the term store, which is the central managed metadata repository in 365. And so that includes things like synonym matching. So you could say, look for any of these 7 different synonyms, and where you find any of those, then tag the document with this metadata term. You can build out open term set. In other words, let the computer tell you what it reckons the values should be in the fields. And one of the more significant things there, and apologies to people who have no background at all in this stuff because it might be going too deep, but you can set content types, and a content type is basically a profile of a set of metadata for related to a particular item. So a classic one for a content type is you might have a contract, and you might say, when I tag this document as having this content type, then make these fields available that are relevant to a contract. So the content type can be published right across the system, and it can sort of make available additional metadata about that type of content. And then, sorry, Judi, but just before, just to finish this bit off, then the content type itself can be defined as a managed property. So then you can trigger the classifications in the background. You can use a content type as part of your criteria for identifying things. So basically you use SharePoint Premium to identify things and go, cool, these are all contracts. And then you go, great, find me all the things that SharePoint Premium said were contracts, and apply a sensitive, you build a sensitive information type that then relates those things, or you trigger the auto application of a sensitivity label based on that, things like that. And so suddenly it can get quite sophisticated. Sophisticated being a code word for could break horrifically, but
could allow you to go really fast and do lots of really cool stuff automatically, which means break things at scale or fix things at scale. Yes,
exactly that. You know, like massive opportunities. And
let's apply a regulatory label, regulatory record label. I keep coming back to because it just it really just
that's right. But
things.
again, so long as you didn't go all the way to building out the rules that actually sort of constrain what actually happens, like lock everything down or like encrypt it all in place, so you basically got this giant block.
You really test it, really test it thoroughly first, and do it in a considered way. Can you do entity extraction type stuff out of there? Pull out specific.
Yeah, you're supposed to be able to. I haven't seen it. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I really haven't worked with Premium at all yet. But I've watched videos and things and heard talks from people who I trust rather than just sales folks.
Yeah. It sounds brilliant. I'm again, as with everything Microsoft 365, quite bullish on it. But
I'll emphasize that it is called SharePoint Premium, so it applies to a narrower scope of information. Like it's literally SharePoint, so you cannot set up fanciness to auto extract stuff from emails in place or from OneDrive. Well, hang on, I think OneDrive might be in scope, but I don't know. Yeah, because OneDrive's sort of, the storage layer behind OneDrive's SharePoint.
Yeah, SharePoint.
Yeah. So it's, I guess what I'd say about all of this is it's all additional stuff on top of the kinds of technology sort of controls or features or things we're used to working with in information land. And so there's amazing opportunities there, but I think people sometimes get a bit sort of panicked that there's some kind of urgency about this, that we've got to jump onto this straight away. But I would sort of question that, because I'd say, well, we actually survived without these technologies. And when I say survived, maybe we would be very critical of actually how our performance has been so far. However, you don't need to rush the change. Yeah.
I mean, it seems an opportunity for me, but how you take it from being interesting tech to in production, you doing really good things for you in your organization that provide increased utility for front end users and good information manager type stuff. I mean, to me, that's the question underlying this for me. How do we get to that?
And like so many of these things, it's going to take time and resource to prove whether it's going to be valuable or not, and maybe not something that many places have an appetite for right now.
No, that's right, and I think like one of the challenges is always for this new stuff is that like, it looks like this great opportunity, and maybe it'll create efficiencies as well as greater quality. So actually, we'll save ourselves time. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
And I think
we can shift our focus to higher productivity things. All the usual stuff we say, but it's unproven. So.
Of course, one thing in its favour is that it is part of Microsoft 365, and therefore the IT department are going to be more in favour than if you're trying to buy some other technology to do some of that stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and to my point before about how you don't need to rush this thing, like what I typically see is there's IT folks going, "Oh my gosh, we're completely non-compliant and we're completely deficient," and they start freaking out about our compliance profile.
Good
when
Lord.
Really, which is amazing, right? Because it's
Yeah.
ordinarily not their purview, as it were.
Oh, yeah.
Waka.
Like what you did there.
So it's but really it's like, oh well, you've just seen some fancy tech and drunk the Kool-Aid, but you can chill out. Like it's not your responsibility to work this stuff through. Yeah.
No, but I mean the thing that's been amazing about the Microsoft model for me more than anything has been how we've got access to all of this stuff, and we haven't had to go through a procurement process to get that access. And I mean,
Yep.
that's both a positive and a negative, because if we're going to go through a procurement process to do it, we'd have to sit down and define our business requirements and get executives to agree to, that yes, these are things that we want and there is a business case for doing them, and we agree that that's the right way to go. And now let's work out an implementation plan. I mean, in some ways, it's a double-edged sword, because by forcing people to go through that, you potentially remove the
really get
potential
them
for
to
a lot
think.
of good things to happen. But yeah, exactly. You really also get them to think. Whereas, I mean, I think that's the process that we probably all need to work out for this is, what's the pattern of experimentation in our organisation?
Yeah, that's right.
That helps us validate, helps us, understand that this will deliver genuine business needs, so that we can then roll it out. Actually add these.
And I really think, I mean, to their credit, I mean, when I've talked to people from Microsoft, they definitely say this as well, is you really want to identify, your use case and the outcome that you hope for, and what does good look like, like define your success criteria, sort that stuff out. And I guess that is, again, part of that sort of double-edged sword of, the technology is there, and there's a sense that, because it's there, we ought to use it. But sometimes, because we've bypassed that whole procurement conversation, we've bypassed the bit where we agree why we need it, and so, it's that thing of coming back to, well, when do we think, or basically, all the way back to, well, what are these business problems we're trying to work through? And then when do we think this technology is going to help us? And then how do we test that out? Proof of concept, basically. And then how do we, in a measured way, how do we determine that, we should continue using this technology rather than actually, for instance, I don't know, something much more manual and less elegant feeling is actually the better, value for money, basically, or better result. And I think that's the thing I'm not seeing yet, is where people are sort of at that level of maturity of going, well, we've actually tried all of this out, and we can just, rather than breathlessly gushing about something, or on the flip side being incredibly disappointed, just sort of go, okay, cool. It's good for A and B. It's crap for C. It's okay at D, but we're also going to do some other stuff alongside. Those kinds of just, okay, it's part of the tool set. Let's just have a sort of measured conversation about it. Like that. That's the kind of stuff that I hope we can get to soon. Yeah.
But it really is that measured kind of process, isn't it? It's here are the 20 bits of information, or the 20 things that are important to our organisation at the moment. Here's how we think we can deliver on, a useful piece of information that will allow us to take action on those things. How do we test? How do we validate it? What does a good test look like?
Yeah.
How do we refine those tests?
And another perspective is, I mean, it's a sunk cost. If your organisation can already justify paying for whatever license level it's paying for, then
exactly.
you're not losing by not using the technology. So if you work with it and then realize it's not right for certain things, it's not like you're costing the organisation. Yeah,
absolutely. That has been my thing with Microsoft 365 from the beginning. We have this stuff now. Okay, it doesn't, it doesn't meet your gold standard definition of exactly how you should do this thing, but you can gain so much awareness of what you've got, I think.
For sure.
By using the tools, you can get so much further than you could before, because you've got control, you've got good metadata, you can have.
You can have, yeah.
Nice. So I would love to hear from anyone out there who is already using any of these technologies and has input on how that's been for you, basically, or other thoughts on similar ways of approaching this. Yeah. Thank you, one and all, once again, and we'll be back soon. Cheers. See ya.
Bye.